She came back on a rainy Thursday, the kind of rain that makes the world feel like it's trying to wash itself clean. Her silhouette stood at my door, trembling, a ring glinting in her hand like a ghost of promises long buried. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. 3 years since she tore my heart out in a cafe full of whispers. Since she walked away with my best friend's arm wrapped around her waist. 3 years since I stopped believing in forever. Eli, she whispered, her voice breaking on the edges of my name. And I swear, for a moment, time folded back, and I was that boy again, begging her to stay. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at her, the rain dripping from her lashes, and realized that pain doesn't always scream sometimes. It just watches quietly. I made a mistake, she said. I never stopped loving you. Then she lifted her hand and the ring caught the light. It wasn't a ring she wore. It was one she returned, but the cruel twist. The ring wasn't mine anymore, because the day before she came back, I had just proposed to someone else. Spring arrived like a soft apology. The street was almost empty, a narrow ribbon of cobblestones hidden behind a row of bookstores and a shuttered bakery. Cherry blossoms drifted in slow spirals, landing on the pavement the way fragile thoughts land on a memory you try not to touch. I turned the corner and heard the wet whisper of a brush before I saw her. That sound felt like breathing after a long dive. She stood at an easel propped against a brick wall, sleeves rolled, a denim apron chalked with color. The canvas was all sky, but not the kind you look at, the kind you feel. Streaks of blue and small scars of white, a storm trying not to happen. Her strokes were careful and furious in the same breath, like she knew what broke her and dared it to break her again. I stopped, because something in me recognized the argument in her hands. A gust shook the trees. Petals fell like confetti promised to the wrong couple. One landed on the wet paint and stuck there, a pale pink crescent on a sea of blue. She noticed and smiled without surprise, as if the world made a habit of interrupting her, and she had made a habit of forgiving it. When her eyes rose to meet me, I felt the small, dangerous relief of being seen and not repaired. "Do you ever repaint your own sky?" she asked, as if it were ordinary to greet a stranger with a question. Her voice was the color of warm paper and pencils, quiet, textured. I could have lied. I could have hidden the ache behind the kind of laugh that doesn't belong to anyone. Instead, I said, "I tried." It kept raining. The truth came out like fog on glass, and I didn't wipe it away. Maybe I wanted someone to write a message in it. She tipped her head, studying me the way artists study shadows on bright days. "Rains are honest," she said. "They show us what leaks." She dipped her brush, lifted it, then paused. "I'm Arya." She didn't offer a hand. She let the distance breathe between us, a small mercy for my skittish heart. "Eli." I answered, hands in my pockets, palms remembering the weight of a ring I'd once thought I would never remove. The wind carried the smell of turpentine and wet stone. Bells from the church at the end of the street chimed 3 times, and time, obedient for once, slowed down for us. We talked like people who had been taught to whisper around fragile things. About color temperatures. About how ochre feels like a late afternoon in July, and how ultramarine smells like a library no one visits. She told me studios have languages that require both silence and music. I told her I had once loved someone who swore she'd never leave and then left with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My words fell to the cobblestones and didn't shatter. That surprised me. Arya didn't flinch. She didn't reach for me. She didn't push past the locked door. She simply said, "Then let me help you repaint it," and returned to the canvas, making room beside her with a small shift of her body, like a theater seat offered in the dark. I stepped to the edge of her weather, careful to keep one foot out of the frame. We stood that way for a while. It's people in a sky refusing to be simple. She handed me a paper cup of coffee from a thermos I hadn't noticed. No sugar, no questions. Steam curled like a small ghost and warmed the air between us. "Hold this," she said, and I did. The way I once held promises, steady and afraid of spilling. A petal drifted into the cup, trembling on the surface before surrendering to the dark. I watched it sink and thought of vows. I watched it rise and thought of survivors. When she painted, her shoulders settled. When she paused, they lifted, as if the canvas breathed through her. People think artists chase beauty, she murmured, but we chase proof. Proof that a bruise can become a color that doesn't hurt anymore. Proof that a silence can be a sentence that ends with something other than goodbye. I listened and felt something inside me exhale, a locked window opening to a room I had been sleeping in for too long. A child ran past. It's a kind of blur that leaves laughter behind it. He knocked my elbow, and a little coffee leaped from the cup, flecking the side of her canvas with brown moons. I startled. She laughed, soft, unafraid, and leaned in with a rag to smudge the spill into a new shadow. Accidents are just edits we weren't brave enough to try, she said. Intimacy isn't always a hand in yours. Sometimes it is a replaced panic. Sometimes it is laughter sown where a tear used to be. Do you sell your work? He asked. I wanted to know if I could keep this sky, pin it above my bed, sleep with proof above me that the weather could be rewritten. She shook her head. I keep the first drafts, she said. They remind me who I was brave enough to become. Then quieter. What do you keep, Eli? The question pressed a thumb to the bruise. Letters, I said, surprising myself. Ones I never sent, could feel them in my pocket, even though they weren't there. That heavy fabric of unsaid things. She nodded like she understood how words can become paper, that becomes anchors, that become monuments you visit when the city is asleep. A breeze lifted her hair and carried it across her cheek, and I had the impulse to tuck it back. I didn't. Distance can be a kind of reverence. Instead, I pointed at the petals sealed in blue and said, "Leave it." She did. We watched it dry into the sky together, a small imperfection, legalized by witness. That felt like trust. The clouds pulled apart above us. Light fell in slats, dusty and kind, on the bricks. Arya began a wash of pale gold that turned the entire canvas into a held breath. Beginnings are simple, she said, and complicated. I stood there thinking how every first step is already half a confession. I stood there thinking how my heart had learned to flinch before it learned to dance. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. 1. Then twice, a rhythm my body remembered before my mind would admit it. The screen lit through the denim with a name I hadn't said aloud in years. Lena. The letters were clean as glass and just as dangerous. I didn't answer. But the sound wrote itself in the air between Arya and me, a thin crack across new paint. Arya didn't ask. She only raised her brush, then lowered it, as if to respect a moment she couldn't see into. Will you come back tomorrow? She asked, still facing the canvas, voice the softness of chapel dust. I looked at the sky she had made, at the petal drying into it, at the place my life could possibly land without breaking. I think I already did, I said. And even as the phone hummed again, somewhere beneath the spill of blossoms and the smell of coffee, I felt the first raindrop of a storm the forecast had not mentioned. Arya became my calm. If my life before her had been a storm that refused to pass, she was the still water afterward, the kind that reflected the sky without
asking for anything
in return. Mornings began in a soft rhythm, the hiss of the kettle, the scent of toasted bread, her laughter echoing against the walls of my small apartment like sunlight sneaking through dusty blinds. She'd hum under her breath, a tune without words, while pouring milk into her coffee, the same exact swirl every time. Like ritual or prayer, I used to wake up expecting emptiness. Silence, the ghost of Lena's name hanging in the air. But with Arya, silence felt different. It wasn't absence anymore. It was peace. She painted near the window every evening, the fading light pooling around her like a halo. I'd sit nearby with a book I never finished, pretending to read while watching the curve of her wrist as she moved. Sometimes I'd think, this is what redemption looks like. Not in the grand gestures or dramatic forgiveness I once begged for, but in the way she existed without needing to fill the silence. Do you always stare like that? She'd tease without turning. Only when I forget what breathing feels like, I'd answer. She'd laugh quietly, as if the world didn't need to hear it, and return to her canvas. We built our rhythm that way. I cooked. She painted. I fixed her broken easel. She fixed the broken parts of me I didn't know were still bleeding. Sometimes, when her hands were smudged with paint, she'd touch my cheek, leaving streaks of blue or gold like marks of gentle ownership. I never wiped them off. Maybe I liked being painted into her world, even if I didn't deserve the colors. But love, even the kind that heals, trembles when faced with history. One night, it rained. Not the cinematic kind that softens the world, the relentless kind that tests your windows, your roof, your patience. Arya sat cross-legged on the floor, painting lightning in shades of violet and silver. "What are you painting?" I asked. "Something loud," she said. "To remind myself that peace doesn't mean silence." Her words settled somewhere deep inside me. Peace doesn't mean silence. Maybe that's why I couldn't stop hearing Lena's name in the thunder. When Arya leaned against my shoulder later, I felt her heartbeat steady, trusting. And for a moment, guilt twisted in my chest. Because I realized how easy it was to love someone new when you'd never truly buried the old. Weeks passed. We grew into a quiet intimacy. Shared toothbrush space. Shared playlists. Shared secrets whispered half asleep. But sometimes, I'd catch her watching me when I thought she wasn't, like she sensed there were still ghosts in the room, wearing my memories like perfume. One evening, she found an old photograph on my bookshelf. It was of me and Lena smiling, arms around each other, frozen in a happiness that no longer existed. Arya didn't ask who she was. She just set the frame down gently and said, "You still keep it clean." Her tone wasn't jealous. It was sad, the kind of sadness that doesn't accuse, only understands too well. "I don't know why I still have it," I said quietly. "Because you haven't forgiven yourself yet," she replied. Then she picked up her brush again, as if that explained everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but my mind hadn't. I stood by the window, watching the reflection of Arya asleep, her hand draped over the edge of the bed, fingers twitching slightly as if painting dreams I'd never see. I wanted to believe she was my new beginning. But in the glass, I saw my own reflection beside hers, blurred, uncertain, still carrying the weight of someone else's goodbye. In the morning, Arya woke before me. She brewed coffee, hummed the same nameless tune, and placed a small folded note on the counter. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, all it said was, "I don't need to erase your past. Just promise me you won't let it answer the door." At the time, I smiled. I thought she meant it metaphorically, that she trusted me enough to face my history without fear. But fate has a cruel sense of irony, because that door, the one she warned me about, was about to be knocked on, and when it did, everything we'd built, everything gentle and healing and fragile, would tremble under the weight of a name I thought I'd forgotten. Lena. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of Thursday that feels like the world is holding its breath. The rain had been falling since dawn, soft at first, then relentless, tapping against the window like someone begging to be let in. Arya was humming in the kitchen, her voice barely above the sound of the rain. The scent of roasted coffee drifted through the air, warm, familiar, safe. I remember thinking how ordinary happiness could feel like a miracle. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I hesitated. Something in the rhythm of it, too steady, too certain, made the back of my neck tighten. When I opened the door, the world seemed to still. She was there. Lena, soaked to the bone. Trembling mascara streaked down her cheeks like old regrets refusing to fade. In her hand, the ring I once gave her, glinting beneath the gray light, like a cruel memory made metal. "Eli." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." For a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. The sound of her voice carried every year I spent waiting, every night I tried to forget. "He left," she said. "I was wrong. You're the one I should have fought for." Her words burned, not because I believed them, but because I once would have. Behind me, Arya laughed a soft, golden sound. The kind of laughter that didn't ask permission to exist. Lena's eyes followed the sound. I saw the moment it hit her. The light in her face faltered, her lip trembled. "You moved on?" she whispered. I looked at her, at the woman who had shattered me and come back only. When her world fell apart, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the girl I'd once loved, but as a stranger standing in the ruins she made. Yes, I wanted to say, but my voice caught. Not from love, but pity. Pity for the woman who thought the world paused for her return. Rain dripped from her hair, down her chin, into her open palm. She held the ring tighter. I kept it, she said softly. All this time? You also kept your silence, I replied. The words came out quieter than I expected. It's like a confession instead of a defense. Her eyes searched mine for a piece of the boy she left behind. But that version of me was gone. Buried under years of healing and paint and quiet mornings, with someone who saw me as something more than a backup plan. Behind me, Maria's footsteps approached. She peeked through the doorway, a towel in one hand, confusion in her eyes, tenderness still lingering from the morning's laughter. Eli, she asked. Lena froze. Two worlds collided in that small space between heartbeats past and present. Guilt and grace. Arya looked from Lena to the ring, then to me. And though her expression was calm, I saw the storm forming behind her eyes. I'll get more coffee, she whispered, disappearing back into the kitchen. Her voice was steady, but her footsteps weren't. Lena stepped closer, desperation cracking her composure. Eli, please. I can make it right this time. I can't, I said. And it wasn't anger, it was something softer, sadder. The kind of tone that comes when the wound has already healed and you no longer want revenge. Only distance. The rain outside grew louder. As if echoing her unraveling, she looked past me again, toward the light of the kitchen. You really replaced me that easily? I almost laughed. Easily. Healing is never easy. It's just quieter than pain. I stepped forward and gently closed the door. Between us, before the rain could drown us both. For a moment, all I heard was rain. Then her voice muffled, trembling, breaking against the door. Then I'll wait this time. I stood there, forehead against the wood, eyes closed. But there was nothing left to wait for. Inside, the kettle began to whistle. Arya was still there, still choosing peace, while I stood in the echo of a storm I thought had passed. I turned toward the sound, toward the warmth that had been patiently teaching me how to breathe again. But as I reached for the mug, she left waiting for me. On the counter, I noticed something else. A single paintbrush lying broken beside the sink. And in that quiet, I realized even the calmest hearts can sense when a storm has found its way home. Lena didn't vanish. She became a shadow stitched into my days. Quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. Her name appeared on my phone more often than my own reflection did. Apologies written like prayers. Messages sent at midnight. I just want to talk, or please let me explain. Sometimes I didn't answer. Sometimes I did short replies, sharp like broken glass. But even silence has weight, and hers began pressing on the walls of my new life. Arya noticed. Of course she did. She never asked outright, never accused. She just grew quieter. Her laughter, once bright enough to color the dullest morning, now carried an undertone of rain. I'd catch her staring out the window, brush still in hand, but unmoving. The half-finished painting of us sitting there, the two of us beneath sunlight, her hair a storm of gold. But the longer Lena lingered, the more that sunlight dimmed one evening, Arya set her brush down mid-stroke and said, "Do you still love her?" The question fell into the air like a match dropped on gasoline. I looked at her, at the woman who had patched my heart with quiet patience. I wanted to promise her that the ghosts were gone. But the truth hesitated. I don't know what I feel anymore. The silence after was unbearable. She blinked once, then again. Her eyes glistened, not with anger, but disappointment. The kind that doesn't scream because it's too tired to. She nodded slowly, as if that was the answer she expected. I thought so, she whispered. That was the moment I lost her, not because of Lena, but because of my hesitation. That single, fragile pause where love should have been certain. The next morning, the apartment smelled like turpentine and rain. Aria's brushes were gone. Her easel folded neatly by the door. And the painting, our painting, sat unfinished on the table. Two figures under sunlight, one of them fading into the background. The silence she left behind wasn't empty. It was loud. It hummed with all the things I never said. For a week, I didn't move. I slept on the couch, ate nothing, spoke to no one. The world continued spinning outside my window, unaware that mine had stopped. I thought about calling her, typing, deleting, typing again. Every word felt too heavy or too small, and when the phone finally rang, I almost believed it was her, but it wasn't. It was Lena, standing at my door again, smiling like the rain had finally chosen her side. "You look better," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I told you time would fix us." Her confidence was almost cruel. She looked around the apartment at the empty space where Aria's paintings once hung, at the discarded coffee mugs, at the folded easel in the corner, and smiled like victory. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Eli. She's gone, isn't she?" I didn't answer. I just watched her walk farther in, her heels echoing against the wooden floor. Then she stopped. On the table, still open, was a small velvet box. The ring I'd bought for Aria. The one I never got to give her. Inside, a slip of paper rested under the diamond. "To Aria, for the piece you gave me." Lena's smile faltered. Her fingers trembled as she traced the box's edge. "You were going to marry her?" I nodded. "Yes." Her eyes widened, not in pain but in disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend losing something she assumed would always wait, I thought. She began, but the words collapsed under their own weight. I stepped closer, my voice barely a whisper. "You thought wrong." She tried to meet my gaze, but mine was steady now, not angry. "Just finished. I was never yours to win back," I said softly. And in that sentence, I finally felt free. Lena's tears came quietly, sliding down her face like the rain outside. She reached for me once, instinct, habit, but I stepped back. For the first time, saw the truth between us clearly. She was my past dressed in regret. Aria was my future painted in light, and I had let the past ruin what was meant to heal me. Lena left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sound echoed through the empty apartment like an exhale after years of holding my breath. I turned to the table, to the ring still waiting in its open box. My reflection glimmered faintly in the diamond, tired, older, but finally honest. Outside, the rain began to slow, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to chase after what was leaving, because some storms aren't meant to be survived together. They're meant to teach you how to start again. A month passed like a slow season. The days blurred into gray, each one folding into the next, heavy with what-ifs and silence. The apartment still smelled faintly of her turpentine coffee, and the soft warmth of someone who once turned my mornings into beginnings. I thought the world had forgotten her. I thought maybe I had too. Then one evening when the sun was bleeding out behind the buildings, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in her delicate handwriting, small, precise, like she'd been afraid the ink itself might tremble. I stood there for a long time before opening it. My hands shook, not from hope, but from the memory of it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Her words simple, careful, final. "Some loves are meant to heal, not to stay. But I hope when you paint again, you'll remember the color I gave you, the one called peace. No apology. No plea, just peace." That was her always knowing how to leave with grace, even when I didn't deserve it. I read it again and again, until the ink began to blur under my thumb. Then I framed it. Not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that some people arrive only to teach you how to be whole again. Weeks later, I opened my first art exhibit. It wasn't supposed to be about her, but somehow it was. Every painting carried her fingerprints, the silence she left, the light she gave, the rain she taught me to forgive. The gallery was small, dimly lit, the air thick with varnish and nostalgia. The canvases hung in a slow rhythm of ache and recovery, storms melting into dawn. Empty chairs facing windows, hands reaching but never quite touching. People whispered words like melancholy, truth, and rebirth. But all I saw were fragments of the girl who taught me that love could be soft. In the center of the room hung the final piece, the one I finished the night I received her letter. I called it Closure. It showed a man standing in the rain, his back to the viewer, a ring in his open palm, water streaming down his face like quiet acceptance. The colors bled into one another, blue, gray, and that faint gold she once used when painting sunlight. Halfway through the evening, I saw her. Not Arya. Lena. She stood at the entrance, dressed in black, her eyes tracing the room with something between awe and guilt. Time had touched her, softened the sharpness, carved the years into her expression. When she reached closure, she stopped, didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared like the truth was finally catching up to her. She touched the edge of the frame lightly, her voice trembling. "That's you, isn't it?" I nodded. "And the ring?" "The one you gave back," I said quietly. "And the one I never gave to her." She swallowed, eyes glassy. "You really loved her." I did. I met her gaze. But she loved me differently. She loved me in silence, when I didn't know how to deserve it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain played from the speakers in the background, part of the exhibit's ambience, but it felt real. It always did when she was near. Lena's shoulders shook. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But this time, it wasn't a plea. It was a confession, raw and small and finally honest. I didn't answer, because forgiveness had already happened, just not between us. When she left, she didn't look back, and I didn't stop her. As the gallery lights dimmed, I stood before closure and realized something quietly miraculous. The ache wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft, manageable, human. Arya's letter hung in the corner of the exhibit, framed under glass. People stopped to read it, murmuring about the words as if they belonged to them, too. I watched one couple smile through tears after reading it, their fingers intertwined. And for the first time, I didn't feel envy, only gratitude. Because she was right. Some loves are meant to heal, not to stay. And peace once given never really leaves. I stepped outside as the last guest left. The rain had started again, light, forgiving, familiar. I tilted my head to the sky, closed my eyes, and let it fall on me. Somewhere I thought Arya would have smiled, because I finally learned to breathe in the color she left behind. A year passed, the world turned. And so did I. My name began to whisper through galleries, soft at first, like a rumor carried by curious lips, then louder, echoing across walls painted with my pain. Critics called it love's aftermath. I called it learning to breathe again. They said my art felt like heartbreak in color, but to me, it was resurrection. Every stroke of the brush was an exhale I had been holding since the day Arya left. Every painting was an apology I never got to say, and a prayer I didn't know I still believed in. But tonight was different. It was my final show of the season. My story, framed and hung for strangers to feel. The gallery lights glowed like suspended stars, falling gently over my work, canvases of rain, silence, and half-finished skies. At the center stood my newest piece, the one I had painted in the quiet hours when sleep refused to visit, 2 hands reaching, almost touching but never quite. The space between them was everything I had ever lost. People gathered, murmuring words like tragic, intimate, divine. I smiled politely, letting their praise wash over me without sinking in. Because art, I had learned, isn't born from praise, it's born from ache. Then I felt it. That old, familiar pull in the air. I turned, and there she was, Lena. Time hadn't been kind or cruel. It had simply been honest. The arrogance that once defined her had softened, replaced by something fragile. Regret looked good on her. Not beautiful, just real. She stood at the edge of the room, hesitant. Like she was stepping into a memory she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter. When our eyes met, she smiled, small, uncertain. I nodded, A silent greeting. Nothing more. She walked slowly through the exhibit, her fingertips brushing over the edges of frames, eyes tracing every piece, as if searching for herself in them. And maybe she found pieces in the colors of betrayal, in the muted tones of what used to be us. When she reached that painting, the hands, the space, the ache, she stopped. The crowd around us faded, voices dimming until all I could hear was the soft hum of the gallery lights and the echo of my own pulse. "This is us, isn't it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I looked at the painting, at the distance between those two hands, at the emptiness that said more than any love letter ever could. Then I smiled, soft, gentle, final. "No," I said. "This is what we could have been." Her breath caught. Her hand rose slightly, almost instinctively, as if she wanted to touch me, or maybe the art, or maybe the past. But I stepped back. She blinked, hurt flickering across her face like a dying flame. "I never meant to what?" I asked quietly. "To hurt me? To come back only when you were broken?" She didn't answer, because there was no answer. Only silence, the same silence she left me with years ago. The tears came quietly this time. Not the dramatic kind, but the real ones. The kind that don't ask for forgiveness. Only understanding around us, people continued to murmur. Cameras flashed. Applause rose from another corner of the gallery. And there, in the middle of that noise, I realized this was the final scene of us. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't love her either. I simply didn't need her. That was my quiet revenge. She reached for me again, one last reflex from a past life. But I had already stepped away into the light that once terrified me. Behind me, I heard her tears hit the marble floor, soft, rhythmic, like rain returning to the earth, they called it. Poetic justice later. The man who turned heartbreak into art, the lover who found peace in pain. But for me, it wasn't revenge. It was closure, painted, framed, and finally understood. Because peace isn't silence. It's standing in the same place where you once bled. And realizing the wound doesn't hurt anymore, as the lights dimmed and the last guests drifted out. I looked one final time at the painting, those two hands. Forever reaching, never touching. And I whispered, not to Lena, not even to Arya, but to the ghost of who I used to be. You made it. The rain started outside again. Faint against the glass, not mournful, not cruel, just cleansing, and for the first time I didn't look back.